Evening guys, Real 111T here. I thought I'd do a quick video, talk about a couple of camp stove options for your bug out bag. And I'm going away from stuff that may necessarily be brand new. Bring up some strengths of some classics, some might call them, some old school camp stoves. Here on the left we have an old Optimus 8R, and on the right we have, depending on when you bought it, it might be known as an Optimus Climber or a Svea 123R. Okay, and you know, the 8R is available on eBay all the time basically. You can find the 123s and the 123Rs on eBay. There are collectors out there, so you're going to be fighting against collectors. The Svea 123R is still, it's available in a current production model. I tend to question how much longer it's going to be available. Okay, this, you know, if you look at the website, even the company's own website gets wrong how old this is. They say it's 100 years old. The best information that I've been able to come up with, it's either the late 40s or early 50s. Is sometime in the 50s this was designed, so it's not 100 years old. This one is. These both were very popular in the 60s and 70s and 80s. You know, they're still popular today. You know, they have some things going for them, and we're going to get into that here. Basically, if you wanted a stove that you could pack away, a lot of people, you know, go with an alcohol stove, and there's a lot going for alcohol stoves. I pack alcohol stoves away in a lot of my kits, some of those lead mark kits. You know, for the money to purchase the stove and the cook kit, you know, they're cheaper to get started in. The alcohol stoves are. They're simpler, very simple. Okay, there's really not a whole lot to go wrong with them. Okay, there are some disadvantages. And the disadvantages with an alcohol stove is the volume of heat per, or the amount of heat per volume of fuel is comparatively low compared to petroleum fuel. And so what a lot of people do when they step up from an alcohol stove, the first thing they step up to is going to be a butane stove, and those can have issues in extremely cold environments. The fuel can be problematic. The fuel is expensive. It's inherently, I mean, it's hazardous. Any of the fuel, the Coleman fuel for these ones is hazardous as well. But the containers are, you know, hazardous in terms of they can be damaged. If an O-ring fails on the stove, you can have a fuel leak that can result in a fire. You know, essentially the fuel really wants to get out of that container. Okay, these stoves both burn Coleman fuel. Theoretically, they would burn gasoline as well. I really don't recommend that. Coleman fuel is really going to be your ideal fuel for any stove that claims to be a gasoline stove. Coleman fuel is probably the best fuel you could hope for. Now, the reason that these have sort of an advantage over a lot of the current ones, like you could go out and you could buy, you know, Primus Omni Fuel or an Optimus Nova, and those are great stoves. But or MSR Dragonfly or MSR XGK, you know, there's a whole bunch of these new modular stoves out. They use a separate fuel tank and bottle, and then there's a fuel line. And for my money, and I have several of those stoves, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you that they're junk. They're not. But for something that you're going to pack away, what's always bothered me, the weak point I think on all of those designs is the flexible fuel hose. Okay, it's essentially a reinforced rubber hose. Okay, and the entire system is based on it. It's susceptible if you have a runaway fire. It's susceptible to getting damaged by that. It's susceptible to getting kinked when it's collapsed and packed away. You know, the rubber is susceptible to dry rot. You know, and a lot of those new designs, not only do they have that, they've got other issues with them. You know, they've got O-rings everywhere. You know, the Nova is pretty famous for having an issue with its fuel filter. This tiny little thing, about the size of an eighth of a grain of rice, can shut that stove down. Okay, if you have a Nova and you don't know where the fuel filter is, educate yourself, because if the stove starts acting funny, a lot of times just taking the fuel filter out, it'll run fine again. Okay, so you should always have some spare fuel filters with you, but you know, in any event, these stoves are sort of an older design philosophy. Okay, these particular two are self-pressurizing stoves. They rely on the properties of the Coleman fuel or gasoline. The fact that if you warm it, it will expand, and basically that builds pressure. And both of these tanks are designed to build pressure. And it sounds really scary, but in practice, it works pretty well. And you're not dealing, especially with the 8R, you're not dealing with a lot of fuel. It looks like this is a whole big tank, but really, the tank is basically here. And so it doesn't hold a huge volume of fuel. Okay. Additionally, both of the stoves incorporate a pressure relief valve here. Okay. So if too much pressure builds up inside here, this blows. You don't necessarily want to be running these indoors. I've run them indoors on many occasions, but basically what will happen is if there's too much pressure in here, and usually what that comes from is putting too much fuel in it. You know, you fill it 2/3 of the way up. Don't fill it more than 2/3 of the way up, because that little bit of pressure will pop that valve, and then liquid fuel will start coming out while this is running, and it catches on fire. Okay, not really the stove's fault, kind of operator error. But as I was saying, there is very little rubber. There's a little bit, and basically on these stoves, all the rubber is on the fuel cap. Okay, there's a little pip of rubber in the pressure relief valve, and there's a rubber O-ring inside of the cap. And that's it. It's the only rubber on this thing. The rest of it is brass and steel. The seals in it are made out of graphite. Inside the valve down there on both of these designs, there's a packing right here. And inside this packing, there's a graphite seal, which essentially lasts forever. Okay. It's not like an O-ring that's going to degrade with time. That's why you can go on eBay and find these things, you know, that might be 30 or 40 years old and they still light up. You know, there's really nothing to degrade about it. And that's one of the key reasons that it might be good in a bug out situation where you really need extreme reliability. Okay. The other thing about these stoves is they're not incredibly high output. Okay. The current model expedition type stoves that burn a liquid fuel, you know, they're all in competition for this mythical 3-minute boil time for a quart of water. They all claim to boil water in 3 minutes. These stoves were designed before that was really a thing, basically. So they get some flack nowadays because they take longer than those stoves. Okay, but in reality, either one of them is a lot higher capacity, higher output than an alcohol stove. Okay, and a kind of perverse result of the fact that their lower output is they're fairly miserly on fuel, which is another good thing, a good attribute to have. You know, if this is a bug out situation, is you want to make your fuel go as long as you can. Okay, and while you could be boiling over a campfire, you know, throwing this in there with a quart of Coleman fuel, or, you know, a couple of quarts of Coleman fuel, you know, it's a significant amount of weight to add to your pack, but it gives you significant capability in terms of boiling water and in terms of preparing, you know, freeze-dried meals, oatmeal, stuff like that. You know, they're great for backpacking even today. Some of the larger models, like the 111, are kind of ungangly in a pack, but these are great. There's several cook kits that the 123 will fit inside. Okay, not so much with the 8R, but you know, I had some GSI kits that it fit into, some discontinued double boiler kits that were really good. Those Coleman kits that they were selling at Walmart, if you ditch the inner two pots and you just carry the outer two pots, you can put the 1, 2, 3 inside that. You know, it comes with a little tiny pot that really essentially is just like a cover to cover over the top. Not really practical. I mean, maybe for water for a dehydrated meal, you might fit enough in there, but it's a pretty low capacity pot. It might work as a cup, but I guess they get pretty hot. I never really use mine for much of anything, to be perfectly honest. But I have used this backpacking, and it's a good little reliable. That's the thing about it, is that it's a little bit more complicated than an alcohol stove because it's got a valve. Okay, but that's it. It doesn't have a pump. That's the other thing. You know, they're self-pressurizing. You know, a lot of the expedition stoves have a pump, and a pump is a whole bunch of moving parts. Okay, and a lot of stuff can go wrong with any stove with a pump. You know, you could have a failure of your pump leather not making good seal. You're not pushing any air. You could have a problem with a little rubber pip in your non-return valve at the bottom. And then, you know, you got fuel pouring out into the pump tube, which could be very hazardous. You know, if you're ever using a stove with a pump and you pump it and then you notice the plunger stick back out, better not light it. So, you know, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with that, you know. And also, almost without exception, I'm not aware of any of the ones that have an adjustable flame, right? That assembly has O-rings on it. They've gotten pretty clever in having them be like fuel cooled so that they can put O-rings on there. But O-rings wear out. There's no way around it, guys. And you know, when they fail, they'll fail in the field at the worst possible moment. You know, these things have a certain amount of robustness just inherently built into them. Just the old school design that they have. You know, there's some other ones that are similar to this that are also very old. You know, what is it? Primus 71 and Optimus 80 are very similar to the Svea in their design. There are Russian clones of this one. This one here has a little aftermarket cap on it, but normally it's got a burner plate on it, just like this is what they normally come with. Okay, but and you can see my one is sitting down there in the muck down there. But I've got this little excellent little silent damper cap on there that really doesn't cut down performance. It just makes it quieter, which is appreciable. These things have a reputation for making a little roaring noise to them, so that's a nice little add-on to that. But yep, I just wanted to point out those things. If you want to see how to light these, there's tons of videos on how to light. Just search for Optimus 8R or 123R, and you'll find 50 million videos of people lighting the things to show you how to do it. It's not as convenient as something like a Jetboil, but you know, the fuel, you can put by a lot of the fuel. Just notice to my dismay that a gallon of it's gone up to like 12 something at my local Walmart. You know, it hovered around $10 for years. I remember when it was $5, but we've still got it better off than the guys across the pond. You know, $12 a gallon. Oh, here comes Jules. Get down, buddy. Get down. All right. Wants to get out. He wants to be famous. All right. Well, I'm just kind of rambling on here at this point. So I think I've made all the points I wanted to make. Thanks for watching.